Right, for some reaction, Jan Vermeulen is editor-at-chief of South Africa's largest technology news website, My Broadband. Jan, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, these recent remarks made by open chat presenters have sparked a whole lot of backlash. What is your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, from a media perspective, the context I can provide is what kind of regulations we have in place in South Africa to deal with this kind of thing, and especially considering that these kinds of shows are not actually on typical broadcasters that fall under the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. They might not be part of the Press Council. And so then, how are they regulated? So that's really the context that I can provide in this conversation. And in this case, all the same laws apply since they are in South Africa. So even though they might not be on a traditional TV channel, a radio show, or even registered with the Press Council, the fact is that in South Africa, you can and will be held responsible for what you say. And we've seen that happen with people making racist statements on social media who then face complaints at the Equality Court or the Human Rights Commission and face sanction as a result of that. And that can include fines, that can include jail sentences. And so that's essentially where this matter it sounds like it's going to be headed for the hosts of this podcast.
Shouldn't podcasters then be subject to the same standards under ICASA? You say all the same laws apply, or is there a different framework needed for digital content?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Yeah. The Film and Publications Board, for example, has for a very long time tried to carve out a framework that would make it the arbiter of that, but it's problematic. And trying to classify or handle all online content, all user-generated content online is an impossible task. Even the amount of user-generated content just out of South Africa is too much for one regulator to handle. So so how this is being handled now is if there is something that generates a complaint, then it is tackled. And so it's not that dissimilar from what happens in the traditional industry. Mm-hmm. There's certainly no pre-screening with regards to journalism in South Africa. We don't have to submit our stuff to a regulator, and neither do you have to submit your stuff for pre-classification like you would a film, for example, or a TV show. And so these podcasts would fall under that. And the fact is, whether you are registered with an official association, you end up, you might not be subject to the Broadcast Complaints Commission of South Africa's code or the press code, but you are subject to the laws of the land. And those are often much harsher than the kind of sanction you would face from the industry associations.
Yeah, because there have been growing calls for a podcast crackdown in South Africa. Just looking at some of the recent events, we know that Parliament, for one, was looking for a means to regulate podcast content, but there seems to be a regulatory gap, isn't there?
I disagree, but that's because I'm a free speech guy. Yeah. As a journalist, I like trying to regulate. I don't understand what the goal of regulating it would be. Are you going to screen every podcast before it airs? That's impossible. And so what they will already face the exact same sanction as other regular citizens of South Africa will face for making racist statements, whether that's on YouTube or whether that was on Twitter. We've had that happen a couple of times. And so those can land you in jail, and that's a far harsher sanction than you might face if you fall under if you just face the wrath of the press code or the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Yeah, and so I feel like our laws already handle this, and those laws should be the ones brought to bear rather rather deal, if there's an enforcement gap, fix the enforcement gap. But right now, unless we feel there should be harsher punishments for these kinds of infringements, which I don't think that's necessary, we've seen that people who have been charged under these laws do face pretty harsh sanctions, whether that be fines, and those fines then often get donated to charities, or jail time or some other public service.
What do you think, in your view, Jan, that podcasters are perhaps not understanding, or perhaps not in the know as a journalist would be, that, when you say this, there will be some sort of accountability?
Yeah, and so these podcast sets are often quite casual. You sit on a couch, like I saw with this particular show, or something like that. But this isn't your house. This isn't a braai. When you say something in public, and even things that you think you might be saying in a private place, like a WhatsApp group, a private WhatsApp group, can be screenshotted and shared outside that group. And similarly, if a private conversation around a braai, for example, gets recorded and shared widely, suddenly it's in the public domain. And so that blurring of the line between public and private is something. Essentially, if you're going to say something controversial, then you need to make sure that you're in the company of people that you can trust, who are not going to share that widely. And for the folks who are hosting things that are in the public domain to begin with, these are entirely different rules apply than if you are just kind of saying controversial things, but in a casual atmosphere. I don't want to excuse what was said on this podcast, but one can see that in a very casual environment, that's the kind of banter that might come out, right? But when you're in your home, that is a very different scenario than when you are live streaming to the internet, and the standards are much higher. And so, and you will be held responsible for, especially, the thing is, when you have an audience of 50 people, you can often get away with it until somebody stumbles upon it one day and signal boosts it to the point that you then face scrutiny. But if you have an audience of hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands with hundreds of thousands of views, suddenly entirely different rules apply. And besides the social punishment that you will face, there are legal consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. Jan Vermeulen, Editor-in-Chief of South Africa's largest technology news website, My Broadband.